Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. O Heavenly King, the Comforter, the Spirit of truth, are everywhere and fills all things. Treasure your blessings and giver of life, come and abide with us. Cleanse us from every impurity and save our souls, O good one, through the prayers of our holy fathers. Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen. So, today we are going to talk about what's going to happen next week. Holy Week. And then if we have time, I'll go a little bit about what happens after Pascha. But it is, as I keep reminding people, the most important week of the church year. Everything that is about our theology, our liturgical life, our spiritual life is all found there. So I have books for all the services, so everyone will be able to follow along with the services. They are intense. I understand fully and completely that everyone has a life and they have to get a job. And so try to do to the best you can and come to as many of the services, that you can. And by that, allow this week to sweep you away. All right. I think sometimes, as I tell a lot of the people, I did like 8 confessions today at seminary, and I'm telling the seminarians the same thing. All the issues will be there on the other side of Pascha. Right. So just let this week, and then put aside all earthly cares, and next week you can deal with all your the issues and all these things. I try very hard to keep that week quiet. It doesn't always work. And I try to get a lot of things done so that I don't have to run around on Holy Week, but keep it within that point. So really try to do what you can do, get to the services that you can, and really just allow them to sweep you away. And the other thing, which I tell people, be joyful. Be joyful. We know how the story ends, right? One time we had a little kid, he was crying. It was Holy Thursday night, very powerful service, and he's crying, Jesus is crucified. And Father Hopko came and said, yeah, but we know how the story ends, and it's all good. Right? So, anyway, so just let you know, remember I've introduced you to this book before. This is a Lenten Triodion, so that has all the services of Holy Week up until the point where I start singing Thy Resurrection. Then we go into a new book. So we do have copies if you want to. But everything that's in here are going to be in those little books, except for the clergy instructions, which I can't understand anyway. So, and then at that point, we have what's called the Pentecostarian. All right, the Pentecostarian. And the Pentecostarian is the book, as I said, from when we start that Paschal service, right? It says right here, right? With the procession. And it goes all the way through the Sunday of All Saints. So all those services are found in here. And by the way, remember I told you about the book called the Rubrics? Rubrics, that's the kind of the book that tells you what to do when. And rubrics means red. That's the translation of it. So if you look at this book, all the instructions are in red. So anyway, if you want to look at these books, I'll pass them around. I swear I'm losing vision. I want to start talking a little bit about how we approach Holy Week, right? So, as you know, technically, Lent is over tomorrow, right? At the end of the pre-sanctified service, we are officially out of Lent. And now we're into the special season of Holy Week. So, Lent, just go with that. And so we have this little gap between the two, between Holy Week and Lent, and that's Lazarus Saturday and Palm Sunday. Or properly said, the entry of Christ, the triumphal entry of Christ into Jerusalem, right? So it becomes popularly, when I'm tired, my New Jersey comes out. known as Palm Sunday. Or in Russia, they never call it Palm Sunday, they call it Pussy Willow Sunday. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So we leave that Lenten period behind. You'll even notice tomorrow is the last day of purple, though these will still be purple. I'll wear gold. You can wear gold or green. I'm wearing gold for the week. And then we go to black, and all the way up until Holy Saturday. So again, you even see that in the liturgical colors. So we leave that, and we understand that there's a couple ways to think about this. All right, and the first one is that it's an entry. Literally, right? We literally have an entry with Palm Sunday. Right? We have an entry, Christ entering into Jerusalem. We're entering into Holy Week. We're doing all those things that he keeps saying all through Lent. If you paid attention to their scriptural readings, he's constantly saying, I'm going to Jerusalem. We're going to Jerusalem. Yeah, and you're not, this is what's going to happen. And they don't get it. Right? They don't get it. Well, they get it, but they only when they look backwards. But we're constantly doing that entry into another period. The other thing is that it's a journey, right? If you remember from the Lenten class, I quoted St. Nikolai Ajiccia right there about how, we enter into a journey during Lent and we have to start walking. And so this journey, again, has been starting, and you're going to see it even historically as you continue to hear the gospel readings as this thing. You're going to constantly see this entry, and you're going to constantly see a journey. And this happens liturgically and scripturally in all other different ways. I have to move this back because I have to look at my notes. The other thing is, go backwards to how we entered Lent, right? And we entered Lent with Forgiveness Sunday, right? And it kind of prepared us through that whole period. And we enter in the way now that how is Christ entering us? How is Christ continually allowing us to enter into his story, in a sense? Because his story is finding its fulfillment in the next week. So, but I want to tell you a little brief story. So if you've ever had a chance to go to Jerusalem and you go to the Temple Mount, which used to be, it's now a site of the mosque, but it was the site of the temple, the Jewish temple. There was an Orthodox church on there until that was destroyed. And if you go up there and you're able to stand at the Temple Mount and you can see the different gates of Jerusalem. And all these gates are named. You've got the Damascus Gate, which is famous, where they had the moment of revelation. You had St. Stephen's Gate, where he was stoned. And then if you look at those, I think there were 5 in Jerusalem. There's one gate that's walled up. And the Muslims walled it up. Because according to the tradition, both Jewish and Christian tradition, was that when the Messiah came, he was going to go through that gate. And actually, that's the gate that Christ came through when he's riding the donkey. And so the Muslims think, well, if we wall it up, then he can't get through. Well, it's kind of a silly way of thinking, but it is a way in which we understand that if you don't allow yourself to walk through that gate, you're not going to see what's on the other side. If you put up a wall, then your journey to that other into that temple, into the resurrection, is going to be, you're going to be incapable. And so when we enter into Holy Week, think in terms of how am I walking through that gate? The other thing that is an important thing, and this is going to seem kind of weird if you're not Orthodox, but we don't just do these services as a way of reenactment, right? It's not just some sort of passion play or a way in which, we're going to remember this event even though that's certainly what's happened. We do truly believe that when we stand there, we're standing there as this event is happening. Father Schmemann talked about that, the collapsing of time, right, in the church, that you have what happened, what is happening, what will happen, and it's all collapsed when we're here liturgically. So when we're standing and the cross is in the center of the church, we're standing at the foot of the cross. When we put the shroud into the tomb, we're there putting we're there at the burial. When that shroud comes out of the tomb, we're there at the resurrection. And it doesn't seem like, how can that be? But for many of you, you've never experienced this. And I think it will become alive for you, hopefully, during this week, as you see, we're not just doing a play, a reenactment. We're there. We're there, and that's why all these little things that we have are so important, right? It's not just pictures and all that, but it's actually bringing us into that moment. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, for people who grew up as Orthodox, it becomes, how do I put this? It's an automatic, right? We've always had it. I can remember from my earliest times as a child, some of these services, and but we also kind of take it for granted, and then we start to complain. Oh my God, is he going to do all the verses? Sort of thing. That's why I'm a priest, because I don't want to sit out here. At least I have something to do, right? But as you get older and more mature in your faith, you realize the power that these services have. So just keep that before you, and yeah. So the other thing that I want to talk about, there's a couple of things, but one of the things that you will immediately notice is there will be a shift. So the first few days, the gospel readings are going to be like the last lessons that we need to hear. In fact, the church calls those first 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the end. Like you see at the end of a movie, the end, right? And what it means in that sense is saying to us, these are the last lessons we need to hear before we experience what we're about to experience. And each of those has a theme, right? Mostly coming from Matthew 25, around that portion of it. But they're all giving us the final lessons. And on a Holy Thursday, we have the ultimate lesson, which is called the great theological oration that he does before the first Eucharist. And that's the first reading of the 12 readings that night. And it's from John. And it's an incredible, most of what you hear at the liturgy, like at the anathemas, comes from that reading, right? And I'll just say this. So I remember at seminary, so, we were subdeacons, and we're all taking turns, and Father Hopwood did the first reading, which takes about 20 minutes, and he did it with his eyes closed. And I'm following it, and I can see his eyes are closed, and he's doing it all by memory. And I'm following, he didn't miss a word. And I remember the seminarian across from me, like, I hope he's not expecting us to be able to do that, So, but it's a deep, incredible sense. So that journey then, so that first couple of days, that last thing, and then you see a shift. You'll see a shift where we the theology is obviously still there. But we now go into the historiosity. What is happening, step by step by step, as we're leading ourselves. And it's almost like, when you watch a really good movie and something's coming, and you kind of this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and but it's going to follow you each step as you go there, and you kind of get taken away by that journey at that point. But here's the thing that I want you to note, is that And it's a fascinating thing. The church will do the reading. It'll step forward a little bit. And then it'll kind of go backwards. And you get more of a full part of the reading. And then you go to the next point. And then you get to that point, and then it kind of takes a step backwards. And then it goes forward again. And this is constantly happening all the way through that week up until Pascha night. You're taking one step forward, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Then you take 2 more steps forward and 1 step back. And you're like, didn't I just hear that? And then you'll even notice, for example, at the Vespers on Holy Friday, is one of those amazing times where you have all 4 gospel accounts smushed into one. Right? It takes all, and it's all taken from a different perspective, and it tells the whole story in a way that conglomerates the gospel accounts of that crucifixion and him being placed in the tomb. So again, it's constantly looking at, you're always looking at it from different perspectives. What do we see on this side? And what do we see on that side? Right? So just keep that in mind as you go on. So if you remember, I talked historically how Lent was that time of preparation for those being prepared to be received into the church, right? So all those Sunday readings really were put together as ways of preparing people to understand the mystery about what they're about to happen and be baptized and brought into the church. And and that's how kind of, even that Holy Week is still that kind of way of which these are the final preparations. And when we go around in procession on Pascha, some say that that was the procession of the newly baptized coming into the church for the first time and receiving communion for the first time. There's argument back and forth on it. But just to give you proof of that, by the way, you don't need to know this, but do it anyway. So, I mean, we have this account. So anyway, so we have the accounts of Pascha from some of the earliest writings of the church. So really, what you're going to experience next week, we can say, yeah, in 260 A.D., this account was written about this service that was being celebrated in Jerusalem. So you have things from St. Dionysius in his letter to Basilidius. There you go. It's good stuff for you, right? We got this. They got the Didascalia, Hippolytus, Apostolic tradition, Cyprian of Carthage, St. Cyril of Jerusalem. And by the 4th century, you're really getting to see all this kind of being established. But the most famous of all of them is written by Egeria. Okay, so she was a Spanish nun, kind of a nun, and she wasn't really a nun, she was more like a widow. And she was quite wealthy. And so around 380, think about this. She traveled from Spain to Jerusalem. And she wrote an account of her travels, and we still have that account. If you ever want to look it up, Egeria's Travels, Egeria. And she's there, she times her travels so she could be in Jerusalem for Holy Week. And she writes an account of what she's seeing. I'm going to read you a little bit from the account, because I think it's fascinating. So it begins on Passion Sunday with the procession to Bethany, where the gospel of the raising of Lazarus is read. On the afternoon of Palm Sunday, the whole church goes out to the Mount of Olives and returns in a solemn procession to the city bearing branches of palms. There are evening visits to the Mount of Olives on each of the first 3 days of Holy Week, in commemoration of our Lord's nightly withdrawal from the city during that week. On Maundy Thursday, translators use Latin terms, the Eucharist is celebrated for the only time in the year in the chapel of the cross. Just one time a year they would celebrate the liturgy in that particular chapel, right? And then the whole church keeps vigil at Constantine's Church of Eleone on the Mount of Olives, visiting Gethsemane after midnight and returning to the city in the morning for the reading of the gospel for the trial of Jesus. And in the course of the morning of Good Friday, all venerate the relics of the cross, and then from noon to 3, all keep watch on the actual site of Golgotha, still left by Constantine's architects, open to the sky in the midst of the great colonnaded courtyard behind the martyrium, with elections and prayers amid deep emotion. And in the evening, there's a final visit by the whole church to the Holy Sepulchre, where the Gospel of the Atonement is read. And on Holy Saturday evening, the Paschal Vigil still takes place much as in other churches, with its lections and prayers and baptisms. Isn't that amazing? By the way, you think about, that wasn't an easy trip, to go there. But what she said is basically what we do that week. And so we still do that. And that's going on throughout the Orthodox world. And from there's developments. Historically, things are being rounded out. Liturgically, things are being rounded out. Culturally, things are going to be a little bit different in this region than that region. But nonetheless, you really do see all those things happening. So the first thing I want to make sure we understand is why does this year the Pascha and Easter come together at the same time? But sometimes, like last year, it was almost a month apart. Usually it's about a week. So you are going to see, if you're in social media, everyone's got an opinion on this. And 90% of it is absolutely wrong, right? So the dating of Pascha comes from the First Ecumenical Council, because there was a big discussion. In some parts they would celebrate it on Passover. Some days it would celebrate after Passover. Some places it would set on the same day every year. And so the church had to kind of come to terms, this is our most important feast day. What is the day that we all celebrate together? So they use what's called the Julian calendar. All right, the Julian calendar put together by Julius Caesar. At least codified by Julius Caesar, a pagan calendar. And it all has to do with the revolving around certain astrological events, okay? So the Julian calendar is based off of cycles of the moon. The more modern one, the Gregorian calendar, which most of us use, is more accurate, and it's done out the cycles of the sun, right, as they developed it. And there's about 13 days difference between the Julian calendar and the Gregorian calendar. And every so many hundreds and hundreds of years, the Julian calendar is going to get more and more out of whack. And so it's a fascinating study about because like in the United States at the time of the Revolution, most of the world, including us, were under the Julian calendar. And it wasn't until much later we switched. But for the Orthodox, we have remained with the Julian calendar, except for the church in Finland, which is a state-sponsored church. Therefore, they mandated they all celebrate on the Gregorian calendar. So the Pascha is celebrated on the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. Okay? Not to be done in conjunction with Passover, right? That's a very particular, even though practically speaking, they are using Passover, because how they determine Passover is kind of a formula like that. So you would think that it would be a celestial event that you could observe and say, aha, there's the equinox, and here's the first full moon. Watch this week. There will be a full moon this week, and it will be the brightest moon of the year. And that's part of the thinking that goes into it, right? So you'll look at it and say, there's the Paschal moon, right? The question is, when do you determine what the equinox is, right? Because on the Julian calendar, it may be one date, and on the Gregorian calendar, it may be another date, right? So that's the only reason why you have that difference. And then the formula follows from there. So this year, it happens that they work together. And so every so many years, 4 or 5 years, they seem to converge. And then they can go way off, but usually it's about a week, which means we get cheap chocolate as Orthodox, right? We can buy all the chocolate's already been sold and stuff. So anyway, so if anybody tells you anything different, they're wrong. The one thing I will say, though, our Easter, our Pascha, can never fall before Passover, right? It just doesn't because of the way the calculations go. Whereas Western Easter can, in very rare cases, fall before Passover. But if you read the Gospels, some of the Gospels will say on Passover, and some will say after the Passover, right? So, there's a theological thing going on there as well. All right, are there any questions? That's as far as I want to go on the calendar. But if you're fascinated, you can really look into it. And more people fight about this stuff than anything else, which is fine. All right, so the other thing that you'll get to notice is that we're doing Matins. If you remember, Matins is a morning service, and Vespers is an evening service. We're doing Matins in the evening and Vespers in the morning. Why would we be doing that? George, you know why? Because we like to confuse people. I didn't know what you're saying.
No, I think it's just convenient.
Yeah, it's called anticipated services, right? And there's no other reason than we're always looking forward and we're trying to take that next step. So we're so excited about it, we're going to do it early, right? I mean, it's about as complicated as that. And you kind of scratch your head. I mean, in monasteries, they do it accordingly, but then they don't have anything else to do, right? So, but in practical parish life, it's become a very long-standing tradition, not just here, but worldwide, for a very, very long time, that they do the services in anticipation. So when we do the first service on Sunday night, the bridegroom matins, it's actually Monday morning. Okay? So just go with that. And when we do the service on, for example, Thursday night, it's actually Friday morning, right? And if we do something, so my best advice to you is just roll with it. We're in anticipation of each thing. And if you kind of count backwards for when the Paschal service has to start, you kind of see then how it works itself out. You kind of work backwards and then you see, oh, I see why they do this and then this and then this. All right? You with me? Okay. So, so the first entry, as you'll see, will be on Saturday morning. And that will be Lazarus Saturday. We already have the icon out because he's in the tomb, right? If you listen to the gospel reading, or the reading, the liturgical hymns from yesterday's pre-sanctified liturgy, he's saying, oh, he's already been in the tomb for 2 days and everyone's in anticipation. They say it much nicer than this, obviously. They're all in anticipation of what's going to happen on the fourth day. And the fourth day is Saturday, right? So why, Lazarus is there for 4 days because they want to make sure he's really, really dead, right? And this is that great icon where if you look at it very closely, you'll see people holding their noses and turning away because what does it talk about in the gospel? How they're afraid that if they open the tomb, he's been dead for 4 days in the heat of the desert, he's going to stink, right? And so it's a St. John Chrysostom liturgy. You'll see I'll be in gold. It'll be a little bit brighter. I'll bring out the bells even, the little censer bells. And it has a very long scripture reading, the whole account of Lazarus and his death. And why do you think we enter Holy Week with that reading? Come on, someone give me an anticipation. Come on, you know the answer to this.
Foreshadowing?
There you go. See? Just let it out. You got it. They're foreshadowing, right? Lazarus' death and his resurrection, in a sense, right? Some would say it's a resuscitation. Is a foreshadowing of what is about to come, right? That Christ even has power over death.
I have heard
Go ahead.
that one of the reasons it's 4 days is because at that time the body would have started to decompose, so it was clearly like
Yeah.
it could be a resuscitation.
Yeah, absolutely. That it is, in fact, really, truly dead, right? Like from The Wizard of Oz, you know. She's truly, really dead, you know, in the little... Anyway. The other thing it has in that reading is the shortest line in the Gospel. Anybody know what the shortest sentence in the Gospel is?
Somebody wept.
Jesus wept.
Yeah.
Jesus wept, right? There you go. But anyway, so you're going to hear the hymns, if you listen carefully to the tropars and all the hymns for Lazarus Saturday, particularly tomorrow night, you're going to hear all this stuff about this is why he's doing this, and you know, his good friend and the apostles, why are you delaying? Your friend is dying, right? Shouldn't you go there and heal him? And he's like, no, this is for the glory of God, you know, and all that sort of stuff. So you're going to get that sense that something is coming up. I'm not going to speak about the Jerusalem donkey because that's going to be in my sermon on Sunday. Anyway, so we enter then after that Lazarus Saturday and that Eucharistic service. We then are going to change and we're going to shift. Because you're even going to hear in that, right? Now he's heading into Jerusalem. Now he's going. He's trying to tell his people, like, we're going. And this is what's going to happen. So we shift to then Palm Sunday. All right? And so that service that evening is the blessing of the palms and the pussy willows. And it's, if we have enough choir, we'll do the vigil. If not, we'll do the Vespers. And it's a triumphal service. Right? It's a triumphal service. Why palms and why pussy willows? Well, in Russia, in Eastern Europe, in the northern climes, you don't have palm trees. But pussy willows come out at the same time. So it became pussy willow Sunday. But if you read the gospel accounts, they say they took branches of palms and willows. So it's right there in the gospel. And I would even go so far, I gave a sermon on this a couple of years ago, that there is a service in tradition, in Jewish tradition, I think it's called Sukkot, where they take 4 different types of branches. They take a palm branch, a willow branch, a citron branch, and a myrtle branch. And they tie it all together, and then they wave it in celebration of the coming of the law. And they still do it to this day. I mean, they're very traditional. And so for him to come in with that sort of triumphal way with the people, absolutely people would get what they're doing. There's also the Roman tradition of waving branches for the conquering hero as well. So all those things kind of look and come together and say, aha, this is what's going on here. So the Palm Sunday service, again, a beautiful liturgy, beautiful readings. We're celebrating that. We'll bless the palms in the evening, and then people bring them, and weather permitting, we'll go on a procession with them outside. All right? Yes?
I was struck with that passage you read by the woman from many centuries ago. Yes, it used the word somber to describe the Palm Sunday.
Yeah.
And is that anticipation of the...
Yeah, because we know what's going on here. Yeah. I mean, I'd have to look at that in the original language. I wonder how that word is translated, somber. Because, like in Greek, sometimes they'll translate English as somber, but it means like sincere or you don't do the Greek, do you? Yeah. Not enough. Yeah, I know. But one of the things, if you had a chance to experience the Russian style Paschal canon and the Greek style Paschal canon, 2 very different interpretations, right? We do the Russian style here, and it's like funky, and everyone's set, it's like, let God arise, and everyone's going. Whereas the Greek, it's all this very somber, I wouldn't even somber, but solemn is a good way to put it. The hymns are so much more solemn, even though in Greece they have like bands and shooting fireworks and all sorts of things. But so it is an interpretation. Yeah. Okay? Great. So now we come to Holy Monday, Holy Tuesday, Holy Wednesday. Remember, that's the end. And then you'll also notice that Everything will be in black. That's a later tradition in the church. Some churches don't have black, they just do purple, they keep it in purple. We have black now, and I like that tradition. I grew up with that tradition, so I brought it here. And you're going to hear what's called the bridegroom matins. So that's Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. The bridegroom matins. Now, why do we call it the bridegroom matins? Anybody have an idea? It comes off the hymn. Behold, the bridegroom comes at midnight, and blessed is he who's found waiting. Right? It comes from the parable of the foolish virgins they weren't prepared. Right? They were supposed to have oil in their lamps, and they weren't prepared. And so the church is telling us, like, are you ready? Are you really ready? Are you sure you're ready? Is that what that's what you're going to say. So listen for that hymn. It's a Lenten Matin service, so hence you have a different kind of format, and you'll have only 3 odes on the canon, hence triodium, so you'll see it come to life there. And then we have these incredible scripture readings. And the first one is the one that gets everyone sad. And that's where Christ, the fig tree, he curses the fig tree because it didn't bear fruit. And like, what did the fig tree do? It was just standing there, right? Why did he curse that? But there's this meaning, like, are you going to bear fruit? Or are you going to be barren? So you'll have that reading. Then you'll have the one reading, which is the one that I tell my seminarians to read every year as a priest, to make sure you remind yourself. And that's the woe to scribes, Pharisees, and hypocrites. And it talks about wanting the nice robes and the sitting in the best seat and, all that sort of thing. And then you have another reading, which is, which you got that one, I forget. Then you have coming up this wonderful reading about the Cassia, the woman who anointed Christ's feet with the oil. Notice it's not Mary Magdalene. It's not Mary Magdalene who does that, despite God's spell and all the other things. Her name is Cassia. And we have a hymn to Cassia. And in the gospel reading it says, my wife loves this part of the service, in the gospel it says, and wherever this reading is done, we will do this to remember her good deed. And that's what we're doing. We're actually reading and remembering Cassia. And if you know what cassia is, I have the cassia plants in my house in Vegas. It's a desert plant that has beautiful yellow flowers that blooms, and it smells like cinnamon. It's got a beautiful smell. I think I have incense that's cassia somewhere. And that's it's also part of the formula for making chrism that we do. So we have this wonderful sort of coming together of those type of things. And also, if you are prescribed to do pre-sanctified liturgy on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, right? But of course, some parishes can do it, some don't. We're going to do it on Wednesday. That'll be the final pre-sanctified liturgy, and it'll be the final time we do St. Ephraim's prayer for the season, right? And there's a special prayer at the end of the pre-sanctified liturgy as well. So that kind of completes the end, right? The bridegroom's on Holy Monday, Holy Tuesday, Holy Wednesday. So then we shift, and now we're getting into the more historical point. Are there any questions before we move forward? Great. So, the great controversy in America. What service do you do on Wednesday evening? Right? Because Wednesday evening is really Thursday morning, right? Remember? Anticipation. And what is Thursday morning but the remembrance of the first Eucharist? So the Wednesday evening service is the Matin service which celebrates the institution of the Eucharist. Okay? However, in Greek and Byzantine traditions, that disappeared and it became an unction service, right? Where people would come and you'd actually have an unction service, which if you did the full one, would be 3 hours long. and you would do the 7 readings and the 7 anointings and all that. So it kind of got, and it became very popular, just let me finish this, and to do that unction service. And they probably, because they try to connect that with the myrrh-bearing, with Cassia and her doing that. For some said that, well, that was a replacement for confession. Some people say, but you're supposed to prepare for unction in the same way that you prepare for communion, right? So there's a lot of controversies. Some parishes do it, some don't. We do not do that here. In my other parishes, I would do that service, but I would do a short, very short unction service at the end. But it's never been a tradition here, and I'm thankful for that. Yes, Daniel?
Sorry, I misheard. Did you say Western? The Western Church does that?
No, the Greek and the Antiochian.
Okay.
It's more of a Byzantine tradition. Particularly in this country. You don't necessarily see it in the other countries. So how that happened, it may have just been one of those developments that's happened. And I'll guarantee you on Wednesday night, I'll get a bunch of people who will show up and want to know where the oil is. So I had some oil. I'll anoint it with oil, whatever. But the most important thing is not the unction service. See, that's the thing that makes me sad, because remember I told you all the theology is found in those evening services. And so the theology of the Eucharist is really found in that Wednesday evening Matin service, right? It really does help point us to understand. All right? I'm off my soapbox on that one. Which leads us then to Thursday. And so Thursday morning, or you're supposed to do it after 1 o'clock, but I'm getting older, I need rest. We have what's a vesperal liturgy, right? So it's a vespers and a liturgy that's put together. We have them every now and then. They're appointed, and that is the celebration of the first Eucharist. In Russian, they call that Red Thursday. You would actually wear red for the service, and it is the celebration of the first Eucharist. So you have Old Testament readings which talk about the institute and prefigurement of what the Eucharist is going to be. And then you have the liturgy, and then something special happens during the liturgy, and that is I prepare the gifts, the reserved sacrament for the year. So all these stuff that's in that little box, at the end of this, I'll have an extra lamb, I'll cut it up, I'll put it into little pieces, and I'll put a drop of the wine on each of those pieces. It'll sit on a pat until it's dried out, and then it'll go into the box. And the stuff that's in the box, I'll consume whatever's left over. So you kind of estimate how much you're going to need for the year. So that's an important part of that beautiful service. So if you see why I'm taking extra time to bring out the communion, it's because I'm preparing the reserved sacrament for the year. And then, if need be, that's the day in which they make chrism at the monastery, where they officially consecrate chrism. And then there's a special service that I have to honestly say I've never seen and I've never participated in, and that is the washing of the feet, right? Because that's part of the gospel reading. But only a bishop can do that in his cathedral. Like I've seen pictures, and some bishops like, I don't want to touch anybody's feet, sort of thing. But some priests have done it, and it's very clear that they're not supposed to be doing it. They read somewhere in a book and they do it. You're not, as a priest, not supposed to be doing that. Only the bishop can do that. And sometimes he'll pick 7 senior priests, or he'll pick 7 random people. Each one does it differently. So some of the bishops do. They'll do the washing of the feet. Again, I've never seen it, and I've never been asked to be in it, because then I got to make sure my feet are clean, that sort of thing. But that's another thing that we have in the service. All right? Great. So then comes to my favorite service outside of Pascha, which is Holy Thursday night, which is actually Friday morning. Right? And that is the reading of the 12 Passion Gospels. So you'll notice that this will now be in the center of the church. It'll be empty. There'll be 12 candles on there. And the service takes place out here in the center of the church, mostly out here. And we will do, interspersed with the Matin service, we will do 12 Passion Gospels. I told you the first one is long, like 20 minutes. And they're from all four of the evangelists, all looking at it from different. And this is when you'll notice, like, you go step forward, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and again and again. After the 5th ode, there is the tradition to carry the cross around the church. That cross doesn't come off. I had a huge one in Vegas that I would carry. I'll use that one. And we have this beautiful hymn, He who hung the earth upon the waters now hangs upon the cross. And you're there as Simeon of Cyrene carrying the cross and planting the cross. And you'll see even how the whole service, the music, the hymns, all shifts. It all shifts from kind of prefiguring, we're talking about this, and then it all becomes very somber. Very somber. And we also do the tradition. On the first one, you ring 1 bell. The second time, you ring about twice, then 3 times, all the way up to 12. We light each of the candles. There's all sorts of different traditions. And Whitestone had the 12 old men standing there, and then one by one they would disappear. They'd be hanging the candles, and who's going to be the tough old man who's going to survive till the end, sort of thing. And there's wonderful, wonderful traditions about it. And so that service is the service of the crucifixion. And there's a part in there that my kids always loved when I did. I'll do it again this year, so you'll see. You'll know. Anyway, there's certain traditions that you kind of grow up. In some traditions, I don't know how they do this. The priest would change his vestments before each one, going progressively from dark to the lightest. First off, that assumes you have 12 sets of vestments. Second off, I don't know how you have time to go in there, change your vestments. No, I'll give you 1 set of vestments. But there are different traditions about that. We call it the priest's fashion show. So anyway, and we don't do the full thing. I mean, again, we do what we can handle as a choir, because again, many of these services can go for 2, 3, 4 hours. So we do what we're capable of doing. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Okay, so that leads us then, because Thursday night is what? Friday morning. Now you're getting it, right? So that leads us to the next set. And this is, Holy Friday is the strictest fast of the year. So if you think about it, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we have received communion in the church, if you're doing all the services. Holy Friday is the only day of the year where you're not allowed to receive communion. That's how holy it is. And so, again, if you remember from my other classes, I talked about how there's certain feast days have certain cycles of services that you have to do. And this is one of those where you have the matins, you have hours, you have vesper liturgy, a compline, all that sort of stuff. So the first service that we'll have on Friday morning is, and I love this service, is the Royal Hours. Royal Hours. Remember, there's the 1st, 3rd, 6th, and 9th hours, right? We only hear usually the 9th hour when you come into church, but there are 4 of them. And what they do is they smush them all together into one service. So you have Royal Hours on Christmas Eve, Theophany Eve, and on, depending sometimes on Annunciation, depending where it falls, and then on Holy Friday. And what it is 4 prophecies, 4 epistle readings, and 4 gospel readings with other hymns, which all reflect on the crucifixion. And it's done very quietly in the center of the church. Each one, it takes about an hour to do. Each service is 15 minutes. And after everything last night and what's coming up, it's like, okay, let's reflect on this. Let's really listen to what we're reading. And And again, there's no censing. Well, there's censing, but it's just a very simple service. All right? With me? And then we come to the afternoon service, the Vespers. Now, what's important about this service is the service of not only the crucifixion, but the taking down from the cross and the bringing out and putting the shroud into the tomb. So it's a Vesper service. It has a gospel reading. That's where, remember I told you they take all 4 accounts and they kind of mush it into one service. And there are different traditions. One tradition is near the end of the gospel reading, the priest will come and take the body off the cross, wrap it in a linen, and put it into the altar. And it's a big deal about who buys the shroud each year in certain traditions. We don't have that because I can't remove that, but we do have something that we put over the top of it, and it'll now be the empty cross, right? And the other thing that you'll notice when you come back is that the two, Mary and John, will also be taken off from there. It will just be the empty cross. And then some traditions have beautiful flowers are placed over there. Some have the white shroud will be wrapped around it. There's a lot of different traditions, so I'll surprise you which ones I'm doing this year. And then at the end of the Vesper service, the priest has put on all his full vestments, so everything. Oh, you can have my hat and all that stuff. And then we bring the shroud out around and we place it in the tomb. And then there's a small service, almost like a panikhida, in front of the tomb as we place it in there. And then after you all leave, the tomb will be decorated with flowers. There's a lot of different traditions about that. The other thing that you'll notice is on the shroud that will come out, and I'll have a plexiglass, Christ's face will be covered with one of the chalice covers, and his midriff will be covered, and the gospel would be placed on that. And so many people ask, why is that? Anybody have an idea? Remember I told you when a priest gets buried, they cover his face, right? The sign of humility. So it's that. Like, we're not going to look on the face of the dead Christ. And then the gospel, that's more practical, but it's also out of modesty covering him up. It's a beautiful and pious tradition. And so you'll see people coming in, and they'll be venerating the tomb. They'll do 2 prostrations, and then they'll kiss. So the tradition is you kiss his feet, right? And then you kiss the gospel. Father Laser, I love the way he used to explain this. There were 3 times we know that Christ was kissed in the gospel. The first time is by his mother, right? You see the iconography, you know she's a mother. Well, we're not his mother. The second time is Judas. We don't want to be Judas. The third time is when the woman, Cassia, kisses his feet. And that's who we are. I may give a sermon about that. I'll see how I feel that day. But anyway, so that's why we kiss the feet of the shroud. And also by covering the face to prevent people from kissing, the wrong place. That's the only place that's obvious to kiss, sort of thing. And at that point, the vigil at the tomb starts. So the tradition is that there's someone in the church reading the Psalms from that point until the Pascha night. Though we shift from Psalms to the Acts of the Apostles after the Saturday morning liturgy. And by the way, when we have funerals, that is the exact same tradition, if you want to do that you'll have someone in the church at all times with the body reading the Psalms with the body. And so the vigil starts at the tomb. I think we have 4 slots open. So if you haven't signed up, go ahead and sign up. And anybody can do it, even if you're not Orthodox yet. And it's that beautiful kind of keeping vigil at the tomb, because what are we anticipating but the resurrection. Right? So then we get to Friday evening, which in many places is an incredible tradition. And that's the Matins. It's interesting. It could either be called the Lamentations or the Praises, depending on how you translate it. Right? And it's all based off of, I think it's Psalm 119. And so the tradition is that the priest will do the entire psalm interspersed in 3 antiphons, interspersed with verses, and go through all of that. And I think we just do one of the antiphons, and there's lots of music about that. And then, as it's a Matin service with the readings and all the gospel readings, and this is actually when I taught practical theology, practical liturgics. One of the questions on their final exam is name all the resurrectional elements in the Friday night's Holy Saturday Matins. And there are like 15 of them. And so they have to see if they can spot. So I give that challenge to you on Friday night. See if you can spot. Some are incredibly obvious, like in your face, smack you on the side of the head, obvious. And others are more subtle. Shifts in music, shifts in the way you're supposed to sense, even. It gives you very specific instructions. And then at a certain point, during the Matin service, we will take the shroud, we will pick it up. I'll get my 4 men who will hold it. We have that horrible stand. And they keep hitting me on the head as we go. And we will go out and bring the shroud in procession at night all the way around the church. And then we'll come in, we'll hold it up high, and people will come underneath it and kiss the gospel, and then we'll put it back in. Okay? So that's one of the great processions of the church. And then there is the incredible Old Testament reading from Ezekiel about the dry bones. Hint, right? Can these bones live, right? And there's a very particular way in the Russian tradition to read it where you have these 2 voices. And my friend Father Sergius, when he was a seminary, he was an incredible musician and can sing, like, what's that highest vote, like contra alto or something like that. And he was able to do these 2 voices in like tenor and contra alto, and everyone's like weeping because it's so incredibly beautiful. And but anyway, there's a very traditional way. And then we have an epistle reading about the resurrection and the first gospel reading, which talks about the tomb not being empty. So, hint, 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 right? So, but he's still in the tomb, shall we say. By the way, what is the Sabbath day in the Christian tradition?
Sunday.
What?
Sunday.
Nope. Saturday. Saturday is the Sabbath. That's a Protestant thing, that the Sunday being the Sabbath, right? In the Orthodox world, Saturday is still the Sabbath because that's the day that God rests. And so Holy Saturday is the fulfillment of the Sabbath, because that's the day that God rests. He's between his crucifixion and his resurrection. Not really. He's really doing stuff. And you'll hear that actually being said. That this is the Lord's Sabbath when he rests. So that's an important way to think about that. See? Everyone does that, by the way, Daniel. So. It was a trick question. But this idea of God resting in the tomb. So then we move from there, and again, the vigil is going through the night, and the priest doesn't sleep because he's afraid did he lock the door? Did someone break into the church? Are there women left alone in the church? I'm waiting for the phone call that there's an emergency, that type of thing. And then we come to Holy Saturday. And Holy Saturday is this incredible service, right? It is the day of the Lord's Sabbath. And so it's a vesperal liturgy, but a special vesperal liturgy. It's a nice, good, long one, right? So warn your people who are coming. It's It's going to be a long one. Just get with it. And we do 15 Old Testament readings. And they're all talking about the Old Testament and about the resurrection. And some of them are incredible music, especially the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? And the three children in the furnace. And the other one is the Pharaoh and coming across, and there's these beautiful hymns that are going to be sung at the end of those Old Testament verses. And everyone has a chance to read, and we try to get them, even the kids, to read some of the shorter ones. There's a couple ones that my family, we kind of giggle, they save, with Jonah, and they saved him much cattle, or, you could just hear, is there not enough graves in Egypt for us in the desert for us to die in the desert? You could just hear the yentas. Anyway, after the Old Testament readings, and there's an epistle reading, and then we start singing this incredible verses. Arise, O God. Arise, O God, judge the earth. And while you're doing that, everything is switched to white. So you'll see them come out, the white will be on, I'll switch into my incredible white vestments, and everything suddenly, everything shifts. I'm getting emotional because it's an incredible, I made it, we're almost at Pascha, sort of thing. And that is a traditional day of baptism in the church, so we're having chrismations, Lauren, Joseph. And the service, in some traditions, the liturgy, it's not prescribed. They serve the liturgy on the tomb, right? When I was a kid, they did that. The bishops don't really allow that anymore. It was I don't know. But anyway, everything is done in front of the tomb in a sense. Like the communion is taken in front of the tomb. All the processions are done in front of the tomb. The tomb will be all decorated with flowers. Ours is fairly simple. You can go to some churches and their tombs are elaborate beyond belief. The one in Jersey City, it took 10 men to move the thing. I mean, it was monstrous. Some of the Greek ones are so intricately carved and beautiful. There are some traditions where the priest comes out and throws rose petals everywhere. And I mean, there's all sorts of different traditions. And that is kind of the first announcement of the resurrection. But we're not there. Remember I said we take 2 steps forward, but we take another step back, so we take another step back. So from that point on to the Pascha service, right, we are now the visual continues, but now we're reading from the Acts of the Apostles. And so the Paschal service begins at 11:30 at night, and I am not allowed to start singing Thy Resurrection until midnight. So you'll even see me kind of looking at the clock and making sure, that it's midnight. And once it's midnight, or the clock in here, then I can start the Paschal service. So the Paschal service, you'll see all the lights will be out. There will not be any candles lit. It'll be totally dark in here. I have a candle on the tomb, but I'll take that out at a certain point. And the first thing that you will hear is what's a compline service. And we'll have this incredible set of hymns that will give you an earworm for the rest of your life. And as they're singing this, I come out at the 9th ode, and I sense around 3 times, do 3 prostrations, and then as they sing, the end of the second time, that I will arise. I pick up the shroud, right, it's arising, I take it in and I place it on the altar. And it sits on the altar for 40 days. All right? The tomb is now empty. Right? And then we'll come in, the doors will shut. We have a little bit of craziness in the back there as we're getting ready. Everyone has candles. And there are different traditions. There's a Greek tradition about a hymn you sing. The tradition I grew up is I will light a candle from the censer. Then take that candle. I have my altar servers. They will go out and light everyone's candles. Everyone will light all the candles here. The doors will be open, all the doors, and they will stay open for the entire week. And I will start singing the hymn, Thy Resurrection, and we'll start going out in procession. We'll go around the church, supposed to go 3 times. In Vegas, I had to because by the time I would get around, people were still coming out. And then we'll come up to here. While we're out there, there's a little group of people here who are moving, putting the tomb back, putting everything in it, turning all the lights on, getting everything set, and then we'll be on the porch of the church. I'll do a hymn. I'll read the gospel of the resurrection. I'll start singing Christ is risen from the dead for the first time, 3 times. I'll do it in a couple of languages if I feel up to it that night. And we'll start sensing. And after I do that, I'll go to the door and you'll see I'll be carrying the Pascha machine, as Archbishop Benjamin calls it, the Pascha machine. It's got 3 candles, and I have the cross that I hold behind it, and my cheat sheet, which is falling off. But anyway, so you'll see me use this all week. And I'll take that and I'll knock on the door. And last year they almost knocked me out because they flung open the doors and didn't give me time to step backwards. And I had to go like, whoa! And everything will be lit. The choir will start singing the Paschal hymn, and we'll come up and we'll start the Matin service, right? And during the Matin service, there will be 9 odes, and I will sense around the whole church during that, yelling out in as many different languages, the Christ is risen as I go around. I have fun. I have a little thing. I haven't done German in a while. I'll do German. Let me do this. But I'll do different language, and I always screw up some because I'm so tired. But I kind of get to know as you go around, oh, here's a bunch of Romanian people, here's a bunch of Georgians, here, you kind of know, so you try to use their language as you go past them. And after the 9 times that we do that, and the priest is exhausted, we then have the beautiful Paschal. Oh, by the way, for Holy Saturday, it's the only day that the priest should not give a sermon for that service, because it's we say, instead of the cherubic hymn, we say, "Oh, mortal flesh, keep quiet." So keep quiet and contemplate this. So on Pascha night, we read from the sermon of John Chrysostom. It's been all over the world, been doing that since the 4th century, reading that sermon. And then we will have a Paschal liturgy, and there are a lot of different things in the Paschal liturgy that you'll notice. Even how we begin and the verses and all that. We do the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom, and then we have communion, and then the priest is exhausted, and we come and I'll bless the artos. You'll see a bread will be sitting here, a special bread that's baked. It's already been done. It came out beautiful this year. And I have an icon of the resurrection, and there will also then be a basket of red Easter eggs. Do you know the story of the red Easter egg? From Mary Magdalene, right? Mary Magdalene, over there. And so after the bread is blessed, the bread will sit in the church for the week. And on Bright Saturday, we'll have a prayer, and we'll cut it up and we'll eat it. And then everyone will get a red Easter egg. And then everyone goes downstairs. They wait for me. I bless all the food, and everyone sits there and eats and drinks and makes merry. Okay? So that's the Paschal service. It's a great, incredible joy. And I'm almost jealous for the people who've never experienced it, because you're going to see it through such fresh eyes, and you're going to get to experience it, and you're going to be like, wow, wow. And it's 3 a.m, and you're like pumped up. And I love, because the kids that come and they'll be asleep, and they'll be on their, and then they'll come to communion, and they're all like, wake up a little, you're trying to do that. So then we go home, and then we have the shortest service in the Orthodox Church in the year. And we do it at 11 o'clock, and it's the Paschal Vespers, right? And People will bring baskets as well. I'll be blessing baskets all day. We will have, it's a beautiful Vespers, joyful Vespers. We'll do another procession around the church. This year, I don't think we're doing the children's events. We're going to do it the following Sunday. And because as June said, give me a break, Father. I can't do it so. Okay, fair enough. Then you can relax. That's what, after Paschal Vespers, then I get a little bit of time off. Until Monday morning. So, all right, are there any questions? So, but we have then, it's called Bright Week, right? So we have Bright Monday, Bright Tuesday, Bright Wednesday. Technically speaking, if you're an insane priest, you do the Paschal liturgy every morning and the Paschal Vespers every evening throughout that whole week. I do Monday, I then take a couple of days off, and then we'll do Saturday, where we do the breaking. And on Saturday after the liturgy, it's sad because then we shut the doors. And we also, while the service is still Paschal, it's not to the same level that you'll see on Pascha night. And then we have, yeah, we're out of time. So then we have the cycle of services during the Paschal period. Each Sunday has a theme. There's the Ascension, there's Pentecost, all that sort of thing. But during that period, the Paschal period, you're not supposed to kneel, like during church. You're lifted up. Some traditions have that you don't fast for the 40 days. I like that tradition. Some traditions, you have an extended period of fast-free. Eat whatever you want. On Bright Friday, go and eat all the meat you want. Enjoy it. It tastes so much better. And you just, and just be joyful with all of that. Trying to think if I missed anything. No, I think I got everything on that. So you don't know what you don't know, but you will know when you see it. And I think, let me see, who has the Triodian? There's a wonderful passage. Don't keep my books. I need my books. You see, I think it's in the Triodian. Yes, I think I read this last time. This is from St. Nikolai of Oak Ridge, right? And this is him writing on Pascha in Jerusalem, right? Remember, this is the guy who was in Dachau and all that, and died at St. Tikhon's. We waited, and at last our expectations were fulfilled. When the patriarch sang, "Christ is risen," a heavy burden fell from our souls. We felt as if we also had been raised from the dead. All at once, from all around, the same cry resounded, like the noise of many waters. "Christ is risen," sang the Greeks, the Russians, the Arabs, the Serbs, the Copts, the Armenians, the Ethiopians, one after another, each in his own tongue and in his own melody. And coming out from the services at dawn, we began to regard everything in the light of the glory of Christ's resurrection. And it all appeared different from what it had been yesterday. Everything seemed better, more expressive, more glorious. Only in the light of the resurrection does life receive meaning. So my brothers and sisters, as we go through this Holy Week, keep that passage right here. Only in the light of the resurrection does anything have any meaning. Questions? No? I was really tired coming to class. Now I'm more energized. I'm probably not going to get to sleep tonight. I'm too wired. Have a blessed and peaceful day. So no class, obviously, next week because we'll be in church. And then Bright Week, give me a break. I'm going to have a little bit of time off. I used to disappear with my kids, and we go camping in the desert because then the desert was all blooming. And so we go out into the desert and camp in there and just get away from everything. And a couple of years when I was in Montana, the parish would give us a kind of a getaway to like Chico Hot Springs, where Teddy Roosevelt used to go. We would just kind of disappear for a couple of days and relax. So, none of that. None of that. Anyway, have a blessed and peaceful day. Let's pray. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. It is true indeed to bless you, Theotokos, ever blessed and most pure, and the mother of our God, more honorable than the cherubim, more glorious beyond compare than the seraphim. Without corruption, you gave birth to God, the Word, true Theotokos. We magnify you. Through the prayers of our holy fathers of Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us and save us. Amen.